Today we are diving into the commandment to keep the Sabbath. I know I've kind of preached on this at different times in the past, and so because of that, we're going to take a little bit of a different direction into that today, but we're going to remember, though, that when God gave us the 10 Commandments, it was to make our lives simpler, to help kind of keep things in control so that our lives are simpler, so that we don't get caught up in so many other things that want to take control of our lives, so that we can be the people that He wants us to be. But to get there, it's kind of hard. To get to that point where God is the one that is in control and we can kind of figure things out and figure how to make things work and our lives get simpler, it is a bit of a challenge. So I want to start first with a question this morning, and that question is this. What's something that is incredibly disruptive to the lives that we have today? I mean, aside from him. What else is really disruptive to the lives that we have today? What's that? COVID, electronics.
Politics.
Woo! Yeah, politics. That came all over. Lots of different things kind of really get disruptive in our lives today. If you listen to a lot of folks, they'll blame all of the disruptions on our lives on something like this. They'll say, our phones are the biggest disruption that we have. It's the source of all evil in the world. When you really listen to some folks, they can get into hyperventilating about that, and they'll say that it's really disrupting. But I'm not quite so sure that I believe them on that one. Because there's something very simple that I can do with my phone. I can take it and I can turn it on, and one, I get to see great pictures every day when I turn it on. But I can just do a long press on there and it comes up and, come on, there we go. And I can do this thing where I just hit power off and ask me, do you really want to turn this off? Yes, I really want to. I haven't done this apparently for a while because now it says, oh, enter your password or your fingerprint so I can turn off. I'm like, now it's good. They are designed not to keep you from doing any of that. But I can't. I can make the active choice. I can say, you know what? I can turn that off. I can turn that disruption off and things will be good. Which also leads to one of the greatest things, the most innocent but best little white lie that we can have out there. Have you all ever done this one? Knowing that it's kind of a common thing that at least used to happen before we all, or at least I obsessively keep my phone charged all the time. And you say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't get your call. My battery died. Oops. I have this feeling that 75 to like 95% of the time when someone says that, their phone didn't actually die, but it was a really convenient excuse to say, sorry, I couldn't take your call that moment. I just let it ring until it went to voicemail instead of hitting the button so you didn't know that I actively turned you off when you were calling. So I say, so we have those things. We can do that. We can turn the phones off. And so there's something we can actively do to get that away. Because you know what happens when I turn my phone off? It gets really quiet. My wrist doesn't vibrate on my Fitbit. My phone doesn't ding at me when things are going off. It gets really quiet for a while. But there are some things out there that are out of our control that we can't do anything about. That can be really, really disruptive to us, and I think that are worse than our cell phones are. I remember when I was a kid. Maybe this was just the fact that I grew up in the 80s and in the 90s. That I remember being really, really excited when I could start answering the phone at home. Now I have a feeling my parents were really excited for this also because it meant they didn't have to get up to go answer the phone anymore. Some of you kids today that if you're under about the age of 30, you might not have this memory of you had to go to the phone to pick it up and answer it because it had a cord on there that was anywhere from 3 to 6 feet long. And there were only 2 phones in the house, one in my parents' room and one in the kitchen. And unless you had that really long cord so that you could walk up and down the hallway talking to someone, or invariably you ended up doing that thing where you got wound up in the cord and then couldn't get out. There's another metaphor in there somewhere for that, I'm sure. But we did that. We had those things and we could do that. And the trouble was, you never knew who was on the other end of the line. You remember those days when someone would call and you didn't know who it was? And so you went, and so we obsessively would go and answer the phone, and my little brother and I love this because we pick up the phone and we go, Kingston residence, who may I ask is calling? You know, with all of the precociousness of a kid trying to sound like an adult whose voice hasn't changed yet. You know, we would do that thing and we'd answer that phone, and I don't know where it happened somewhere along the way, but our culture got hardwired to any time that phone rang, you had to pick it up. And we still see that come out. Have you ever been in a movie theater, a restaurant, at a dinner with family or friends, someplace else where a phone shouldn't be ringing and someone's phone rings and they pick it up and they say, sorry, I am at the movies right now, I can't take your call. We still do it. We still do that thing. And it's because we have this thing that plays off of that. Because back in the day, we didn't imagine that anyone would ever do anything nefarious with a phone. So if someone was calling, they were taking the time to call you. Because we still thought it was like writing a letter. You just didn't write a letter just to write a letter that someone was going to toss into the trash. Someone took the time to write it, so you're going to read that letter. And so phone calls were thought to be the same way. We're going to answer that phone because someone's going to take the time to do this. And you know who figured it out really well that we were going to do that? Generally, they would call between the hours of like 5 and 7 p.m. at night. Right at about the time we were all going to sit down, or supposed to be sitting down for dinner, and we'd pick the phone up and they'd say, Avon calling. I mean, they didn't ever call me with that one. I could probably use it, but they didn't call me with that one. But they would do that. They figured out that we have an acronym for this now. Like, this is how important it's become and how much everyone knows about it. We have an acronym for it now. It's called FOMO, fear of missing out. We worry about missing out on things, that we've just got to know who it is that is taking their time to call us. And so we want to go and want to answer that phone. But somewhere along the way, we became controlled by those things. Because other people figured it out. They figured out what could happen, that, oh wait, we can get people to do things because by golly, we can call them and they're going to answer. And somewhere it stopped being a tool that we use and became something that is using us to get other things done. And there's lots of other things we have seen come out of this over time. Because rather than figure out what to do with that problem, we found ways to mitigate that. First, we had answering machines, and we all got really excited figuring out what fun recording could we put on an answering machine, and then probably have to do it 2 or 3 times and erase over stuff because they all had those little bitty tapes on there that we used to record over. And then we got voicemail, and then we've got email, and we've got all this stuff now. There are some folks that I know that if you want to get a hold of them, you can, if you have their number, you can call them on the phone. You can text message them, you can send an email, you can go on Facebook Messenger, you can go on Instagram Messenger, which is the same as Facebook Messenger, but it's different somewhere along the way. You can go on to Twitter, Twitch, Discord, like there's all this stuff that we can all be connected to now. Have you ever felt somewhere along the way that we've lost control of things? We've kind of lost control of what's going on. This is why we so often need this Sabbath commandment. The sermon title for today makes a pretty bold statement talking about the Sabbath commandment that we can take back control of things. But I think it's an important statement to make, because I think this is what we see Jesus trying to teach his disciples and others in this morning, because in verse 27, he says this: the Sabbath was created for humans. Humans weren't created for the Sabbath. We get the Sabbath on the 7th day of creation when God rested. Not because God needed to rest. If we believe in an all-powerful God, just creating the entire universe probably is not going to stretch him all that much. He's going to be okay. He didn't necessarily need the rest, but he knew that we were going to need that rest. That we were going to need those lessons, and even all the way back then was already preparing things for us so that we could learn and we could know. But I also don't think it's all completely about resting, because there's more to it than just resting. Because if it was just about making sure we took a day of rest every week, then the Pharisees would have been right when they were coming down on Jesus and saying, why are you all working on the Sabbath day? Why are you all doing all this stuff on this on this day? You're supposed to be resting, not doing anything. The Pharisees would have been right. But Jesus says, no, y'all are missing something in here. The real question for us is what is in control. And then the second part of that is then actively choosing for something to be in control. In verse 28, Jesus makes the comment, he says that the human one, or the Son of Man, is Lord even over the Sabbath. That he is the one who is in control, and consequently, he is the one who determines the way that things are supposed to work. What used to be, another question for y'all, what used to be the most important day of the week? What's that? Friday? Friday seems like it, but Friday only became an important day when we got the 5-day work week. So it's less than, being like the start of the weekend is like less than 100 years old. When we, instead of working 6 days a week and probably like 10 or 12 hours a day, we went back to, we did not go back to, we went to 5 days a week, 40 hours. If you remember anything from your history, it's 8 and 8, 8 for sleeping, 8 for rest, 8 for working. I don't remember exactly how it all went, but there was a big, huge slogan back for that. So Friday has not been around for that long, although arguably it is a very important day. What other day? So, sort of a leading question in there. Sunday was the important day. It was the day that, actually more correctly, the Sabbath day, because Sunday really wasn't the important day until just about a couple thousand years ago. Before that, Sabbath was always on Saturday in Jewish culture, and still is. Sabbath is still on Saturday. But for a long time, Sunday was considered the Sabbath day, the day of rest. When I was a kid, I remember getting a glimpse of what that used to be like. One of my favorite book series when I was growing up was Little House on the Prairie. I don't know what possessed my grandmother to get that for her grandson, but I read that, the entire series cover to cover, I don't know how many times, and I remember reading in there, and they would talk about what they would do on the Sabbath. And thinking as a kid, when I was about that tall, that has got to be the most boring day ever. You get up, you go to church, you come home, and you eat whatever you put in the pot on the fire to be cooked overnight until you ate it on lunch, because from sundown to sundown, you didn't do anything. And so, I thought, that has to be the most boring day ever. Now as an adult, though, I go, wait, I can get up, I can go to church, eat some leftovers, and take a nap? This has got to be a great thing. I would be okay with this. Unfortunately, it doesn't work quite that way anymore. We're given the impression that the Sabbath was always this sacrosanct day when nothing would happen, when nothing would go on, but there have always been exceptions to that rule. There are always, even in the Old Testament, there are exceptions carved out for taking care of your livestock. I used to have a guy when I was down in Texas, whenever he wouldn't be at church on Sunday, he'd say, sorry, preacher, I had to go and get my ox out of the bar ditch. Because that was he never had an ox. I knew he was out with his fishing pole somewhere, but I think he named it ox at one point. He didn't, but that, you could do that. You could take care of, if you had an emergency come up, there were always exceptions to the rule of things you could do on the Sabbath. But for the most part, the Sabbath was a day that was set apart. But it wasn't one completely without work. You could always do something, but they always remained the exceptions. And we see this in other places throughout the Old Testament about the importance of that Sabbath time. There's even the 7th year when farmers were supposed to leave their fields to be fallow for that year, and they were explicitly told, you don't plant anything in that field for that 7th year. You've got to survive off of whatever it is that's going to grow there. If our garden were, if this were the 7th year for our garden, we'd be in trouble, because we've got one tomato plant that is coming up without any help this year. We had a couple of chive plants that apparently didn't want to grow last year, but this year they want to grow. I haven't figured that one out. But they did that, and they did that intentionally, because if you know farmers, you know the hardship that it is to get the fields ready for planting. When you plant stuff in there, even if you're rotating your crops, you still got to go in and you got to put stuff on them every year. That's why we see farmers long before they plant, they're out in the fields getting them ready, because it takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of effort. And so they were told on the 7th year to let your fields go fallow to help bring health and support back into them. And they were told to do that so that then the fields didn't control them. They could still control the fields. Sabbath provides order and control because it forces us to stop. And then it forces everything else behind us to fall in line behind that. That everything else then has to be aware that there's going to be this day when things are going to come to a stop, and then everything else has to line up behind that. So I want to put all this together now. I know that taking one day off a week is an incredible challenge for the world that we live in. And it's kind of an unrealistic challenge at this point. My favorite is that I will often hear folks say, we just need to go back to like it was back in the day when everything was closed on Sundays and we didn't do anything and everyone just stayed home. Do you know where it is that I hear people say this the most? Probably sitting at lunch on Sunday after church. You stop and think about that for a second. Wait a minute, it's not a serve yourself place. That someone's still got to be there cooking to do all of the work. I know that that's probably not something that is likely to happen, at least not in the short term, because so much stuff has come to occupy Sundays. But I do like this quote from Stanley Hauerwas and Will Willimon in their book, The Truth About God. They say this: Sabbath is not just about taking time off, it is retaking time. Taking time in God's name, which is no small witness to a world deluded into thinking apparently I can't talk either, into a world deluded into thinking that time is its own. We live in a world that is so very much controlled by other things. We live in a world that really needs Sabbath time. Not just time to rest, but a way of finding time to take back control of our own lives from the other things that are around us that want to take that control away. But in order to have that, much like when I turned my phone off earlier, and Emily is probably laughing at me right now that she's probably thinking, he really wants to turn that back on. The funny part is that if something happens with the sound after this, that's what my phone was controlling. So we're going to have to go with whatever happens in the sound system after this. So, but it's an active choice we have to make. To find that Sabbath time is a choice that we have to make. And whether it is an entire day or whether it is just a little bit of time every day, we need to find that time to take that time when we say, Lord, all right, this time is yours. And the best way to do this is just to make time every day for prayer. It doesn't have to be in the morning, first thing when you get up. It doesn't have to be in the evening, last thing before you go to bed. The point is to make a time and then know that everything else is going to kind of fall into piece behind that. And if you need help with some of that, don't forget there are prayer booklets back there to help with some resources to help with prayer. We've got an online version of that set up on our website that is designed just to help us to find that time to spend with God, and then to know that everything else comes in line after that. Doing the things that are most important. Maybe some of the first things then after that is to make time to make sure we're connecting and we're staying in contact with the people that we know and that we love and that we care about. And then maybe after that to make sure that we're caring for our homes and our families, and then taking time to be in service. There's all sorts of ways that can happen, but it starts first with taking just even some Sabbath time. Because the thing about the world we live in today is that there's always going to be something out there that's going to want to control us, that's going to want to control our time. There's always a new app out there that will make all sorts of the grand promises that I'll help you to organize your day and organize your time so you can take back your day, you can take back control of all the stuff you're going to go through, and here's how you can schedule all that. What they don't tell you is it takes just as much time to get that app to work and to function and to do all of the things as it would to as you would be making up later on down the road. There's always something out there that wants to take that time. Our response is to make the choice and say, Lord, we're going to take Sabbath time, even if it's just a little bit every day, so that so our lives can be ordered correctly, so that things can fall into place after that. And even maybe things will fall off after that because we'll go, we just can't do all of that. Some of these things have to go away. The other thing we have to know, though, is that we're not always going to be good at that. Yesterday morning, went to the Cardinals game on Friday night, and as we stayed with some friends in St. Louis that night, and I was sitting down at their dining room table. I was the only one up in the house yesterday morning, And I was catching up on like a week and a half or 2 weeks worth of Bible readings because I had gotten really far behind. I did finally get caught up yesterday morning, but we're not ever going to be perfect at this. We have to remember the other thing we know about what the commandments do is they help us to be in a community of faith that we know that there is possibility for confession, for forgiveness, and for reconciliation, that we don't have to be perfect at it, but that we can take the time that we need to do, to learn, and to grow. The point is to continue to be working on it. So my invitation for us is that this week we go out and we find some Sabbath time every day. Especially this week with everything that is going on and all the excitement that's going to be going on downtown, to find some time every day where we can spend that time with God, saying, Lord, we know something has to be in control of our lives. We're going to make sure that is you first, and everything else can line up after that. Let's go this week, find that Sabbath time, and know that through God's help, we can find control in our lives that maybe we can't have, that we haven't had for a while. And let us go and do this in the name of the one who shows us the path, who shows us the way, and helps us to live out this life. Let us do this all in Christ's name. Amen.